yesterday was crazy. Yesterday was insane. Now, I will let you know the story behind all of that momentarily. Boy. So this shows that I've got excellent connection. Hopefully I do. Let's see. I'm going to do a little check here, as I tend to do. Let's see. Hey. That's a spoiler alert right there. That's a spoiler right there. Unbelievable. All right, ladies and gentlemen. Let's see how. Let's see if things are showing up. Okay. Let's see. All right. Beautiful. All right, well, I hope everyone's doing all right this Friday night. Last night, I could not do the show. I'm going to give you a rundown real quick of what yesterday was like. Okay, so my great uncle passed away a number of months back. And so there were a lot of books that were left over, or that were left and that we're going to get rid of. And so I went over there and was like, obviously I would like to have, they were, history books, fiction books, different things like that. So I was like, yeah, I definitely want to get some of those books. So I went over there, spent a good portion of the day over there. While I was there, is actually when I was on my way over there, my phone got deactivated, and I got I looked on there, and it said is like trying to activate, and I was like, this may take a while, and I'm like, yeah, it's probably going to take a while. What's going on? So I couldn't text, I couldn't call, couldn't use any apps, I couldn't do anything on my phone. I could take photos, so I couldn't do anything on my phone. Even when I connected to Wi-Fi, couldn't do anything on the phone. It was really weird. So that was very alarming, right? Anyways, so I go through the books, and actually there were DVDs as well. So I went through the DVDs. So I was there with my cousin and my aunt. So we were having a good time just hanging out. And well, my cousin and her two daughters, little kids, right? Mila is hilarious. Anyways, I'll move on. So get the books, and I'm trying to figure out, okay, what am I going to do about this phone situation? So I was really worried about that. I went and grabbed food for us at this place called Chicken Salad Chick. I'm going to tell you this. First time to go there. I guess it's sort of this alternative to Chick-fil-A, because Chick-fil-A is sort of this alternative to McDonald's and Whataburger and places like that. So, yeah. I go over there, and nice people. The girl there was really nice. But it was one of those things, where you just seem like you're too into it. You're too into the job. Like, I hadn't been there. I didn't know really what was good. I was asking, hey, what's good here? And boy, did she let me know. She let me know that there wasn't a bad item on the menu. It was all good. It was all fantastic. And but she kept going so fast. I to an extent, I was still like dealing with frustration with my phone. So that had me off a little bit. But she was naming all the items on the menu. And but with this joy, this, like, you gotta try it all type of thing. Like, she was selling me on all of it. I finally was like, you know what? Just give me the meal with just your typical, average, everyday, run-of-the-mill chicken salad, and let's go with that. So I finally did that. Got out of there. Thank you. Anywho, I'll tell you about that in a second. So, chicken salad chick, we finally got the food over, took it over, grabbed, ate real quick, and I'm like, man, I'm going to be cutting up against it, and I still got to figure out what's going on with the phone. I finally get home. I connect to my Wi-Fi. Really, nothing's going on. Still can't even text. No phone calls. So I'm like, screw it. I got to go figure out what's going on. So I run to one of the Cricket, it's who I use because they're cheap, and it's AT&T, right? Anyways, so I run over to a Cricket retailer, and I'm telling them, hey, this is what's going on. I can't do anything. And they're like, oh, yeah. You switched out your SIM card, or somebody switched out your SIM card. And I'm thinking, that's impossible. Who's going to sneak into my house in the middle of the night and switch out my SIM card and put it in their phone or whatever? Anyways, I was like, no, that's not possible. I said, somebody must have done this digitally and switched my phone, because I don't have a phone now. I got a phone, a physical phone, but I can't use it. They're like, I don't know how that's possible. I go, well, is there any activity on my account? Lo and behold, somebody had called and they guessed my PIN number like an idiot, 1981, my birth year. Look, that was a PIN number just for my phone. You can try it on anything else. I didn't put it on anything else because I didn't think, I was like, whatever, it's not going to be that important. Well, lesson learned, okay? 1981, not doing that one again. So they guessed the PIN, and then they guessed the password answer, right? Which must have been, something easy to find, like what's your mother's name? Something easy to find on Facebook or whatever. So I'm dealing with that. I have to buy a new SIM card, and I'm like, well, what's going on? And they're like, you got to contact corporate. So I contacted corporate today, and I may have been a little more forceful than I should have been, but to an extent, the guy was trying to put it on me. Like, you must have done something with the SIM card. You must have moved it from one phone to another phone. He goes, even for just a minute, just a second. And I'm like, dude, I didn't mess with my SIM card. No one messed with my SIM card. I said, you guys, anyways, I went off a little bit. We got it situated. I got my phone taken care of. It sucked because I was trying to go to bed at night, and then I was just like, I was real bothered about the whole situation, so I couldn't sleep all pretty much last night. Anyways, got the phone taken care of. So another thing that was supposed to happen yesterday was I was supposed to go get a dog. I was supposed to go get a puppy, right? My friend Jared, he has a friend. They had just had puppies. They're half lab, half Catahoula. If you don't know what a Catahoula is, well, Google it. They're real spotty, right? Not like in a negative sense. It's like their fur is real spotty. Anywho, so what happens? Well, I had to wait. Come here, you. I had to wait. And I had to wait for this morning. So my friend Jared brought me the dog this early this morning. Now, I have not named her yet. It's a she. I haven't named her yet, but she is a sweetheart. I'm telling you, she is a sweet dog, and she's full of life, and she's funny, and she's got a lot of spunk, and she likes to play too. And she walks with me, like the Lord. He walks with me. No, but we went to the mailbox the other day. Didn't have her on a leash or anything, and she just walked right with me, and it was all good. So, anyways, that was my day yesterday and my morning, and it has not been great. I'm gonna let you know, but because of the phone thing, getting the books, getting the new dog. The last dog I had was about 3 years ago, maybe a little more, and it was a Siberian Husky. Had to put it down because he had a brain tumor, and he was getting all messed up bad. So that was a tough one. So I finally got a new dog. Hopefully this one will stick around for a good while, health-wise. Won't be going and dying on me, right? Amen. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, let's get to the program. We're going to have a good time tonight. Look, if you missed last week, It's still up. You can go check it out. I'm going to reference that in a little bit. But this one is, the idea is how the founders protected the republic from democracy. Okay? And my dog is pulling on my jeans. Anyways, tonight we're going to be talking about Congress. We're going to be talking strictly about Congress and how and why the founders did what they did. Okay? Tonight's primary text is Madison's notes on the Constitutional Convention. I can't encourage you enough to get this. If you want to know, here's another one too. All right, let's see. Sorry about that. I thought I was going to have this. So this is a good compilation, but in here has the Federalist Papers. Here's the thing with these two books. Here's what you need to know about these two books. This is getting all of the arguments, all the thoughts, all the reasonings behind putting together the government that the form of government that we have now. So it has like all the delegates, like their conversations, their debates, their ideas, accepted or not, wrong or not. It's all in there. I can't encourage you enough to read it and make notes and just know what all they were thinking about at that time. The Federalist Papers is a must-read. This is a must-read because it explains. This is Alexander Hamilton, James Madison, and John Jay explaining what to the citizens, more or less, because the delegates had to go to the people of their state and convince them to ratify the Constitution. They had to convince them. And so the Anti-Federalists were starting to write their issues with the Constitution. And so these three guys decided, okay, led by Hamilton, it was Hamilton and Jay at first. Jay ends up getting sick and he's not really able to give a whole lot. He's not able to write a whole lot of stuff in the Federalist Papers. He writes a few. But Hamilton contacts Madison and said, hey, can you join us in this effort? The Federalist Papers. The first Federalist paper that Madison ends up writing is pretty much probably the most famous one of all is the Federalist Paper number 10. I'm not going to say go read that one and you're good, but if you are only going to ever read just one, I encourage you to read that one. No, stop, you nut. Okay, so, oh yeah, I know. So, read the Federalist Papers and they explain, okay, here's the Constitution, here is how it works, here's why the Articles of Confederation didn't work, and there's about 80 plus of them. Highly encourage. It's some of the best political writing there is. Okay, so, all right, moving on. Last week we talked about Socrates' denouncement of democracy. Okay, this is, if you didn't watch it, last week, I encourage you to go and check it out. Okay, the Twitter mob stuff, you know how like the Twitter mob goes nuts? They go nuts every day. And for some reason, if they go after a celebrity or politician, athlete, just whoever, and people just start going nuts, the media gets a hold of it and says, oh, there's a real big push. So the media sort of plays in with this to make it seem like the mob is way bigger than it really is. And what happens is corporations or organizations, they make decisions based on the Twitter mob, okay? The Twitter mob deserves pretty much every time, an eye roll, especially when they just say, more or less, you shouldn't be allowed to have free speech or free thought of whatever it is that you want, okay? So that's the mob coming at you, okay? Here's the thing. Here's something I wanted to put up of what Socrates said. We're not going to focus on Socrates tonight, but I want to mention one of his statements. And it says this: in all of us, even in good men, there is a lawless, wild beast nature. And it's entirely true that is in all of us. And that's a real problem. And it's something that we all have to to look out for, and that's what our founders did. They thought about this, they understood the passions of people, and that is written about a lot in the Federalist Papers, and it's mentioned a lot during the convention debates. All right, as you all know, my good friend Jay Rofridge, Good Books in the Woods, they sponsor this show. So you need to go check out goodbooksinthewoods.com. And if you haven't yet, go over there, give him your patronage. Great guy, especially if you're looking for hard to find books. It's a great place to go. You can check it out at goodbooksinthewoods.com, and you get 10% off of your purchase. And you can use that, but you have to use the code word history. Okay? So use the code word history. 10% off, and you can use that as many times as you want. You can go to the place of business. It's out here in the Woodlands. You can Google that, and you can check it out. Tell them that the Sons of History sent you, or that Dustin sent you, and you were like, hey, I heard you get 10% off on my purchase. And this dog's going nuts. He's going nuts. You know, here's what's funny is, like, she was laying down pretty much the entire time for, like, the previous hour prior. Okay, no, you're gonna be up here. So she is gonna help me do the show tonight. All right, so tonight's focus, like I said, is just Congress. I want to reiterate, like I talked about last week, I want to reiterate that we are not a democracy. We are a republic. And some of y'all may think, excuse me, I only ever hear the term democracy. That's all I ever hear. Well, there's a weird reason for that, and I think it is somewhat sinister, but I'm not going to really get into that. I sort of got into that a little bit last week, but I will probably get into that later on, maybe even next week. But I want to give you the definition of democracy and then the definition of republic, and it's important that we know this. A democracy, and since we're here in America and we're talking about the American government, I'm using Webster's dictionary. It's a government in which the supreme power is vested in the people and exercised by them directly or indirectly through a system of representation, usually involving periodically held free elections. Now, you're probably looking at that and thinking, isn't that what we are? That is what we are. Okay. Yeah, a little bit. I need you to understand that, okay? And we're gonna delve into that tonight. Here's the definition of a republic. It is a government having a chief of state who is not a monarch or a king or a queen. A government in which supreme power resides in a body of citizens entitled to vote, and a body of citizens entitled to vote. We'll touch on that a little bit, which we touched on that, I think, last week too. I think I went into detail about that last week. Entitled to vote and is exercised by elected officers and representatives responsible to them, to the people, and governing according to law, right? According to the Constitution. So this little girl, I think, is going to end up falling. I don't need that happening. So there's your definitions that you need to know. Republic sounds much more like what we have. You've got more or less the executive, not the monarch, but the executive, as they say, a chief of state. You've got the citizens. Only the citizens get to vote, right? And you've got the officials and the representatives. And then you also have the Constitution, or governed according to law, so the laws that are passed. And keep in mind, we say Constitution often, but that's not strictly what was ratified in 1789. It's not strictly that. It's not strictly that in the Bill of Rights. Okay, Constitution is technically the laws that are passed. Okay, so because laws that are passed and kept are understood to be acceptable with the Constitution. Okay, they are considered constitutional. Which is why you end up, actually, I don't want to get ahead of myself because we're going to get to that. So why is the distinction necessary? The distinction is necessary because a democracy is majority rule. It's majority rule at all times, okay? You got 100 people, 51 to 49. That wins every time. Okay, that's what a democracy is. Whether it's the whole town or whether it's just your representatives. Okay, and we talked about Socrates last week, and we were talking about the Athenian democracy and the problems that they had. I encourage you to go check that out. He was so spot on. This stuff that he was talking about 2,400 years ago were a problem. Were a specific problem. It's almost like he wrote it, or Plato wrote it, after these revolutions took place in the 18th, 19th, and 20th centuries. It's crazy. So that's all from Plato's Republic. So, but if you want, you can just go back to last week's discussion. All right, we discussed the Athenian democracy. So what were the problems? You had chaos because majority rule, and boy, if you lost, you paid the piper. And I made a number of comparisons to like the Spanish Civil War of last century. So it was a little bit like that. Like if you lost, chances were that the reigning party was going to come after whatever it is that you had or were doing. So that was a real issue. It was mob rule. Now, did they have a constitution? Yeah, they had Solon's constitution. Aristotle came later after Socrates as well to work on the Constitution. So those are the good things, is that they had the Constitution. They had a Constitution. They also had elections, right? But it was set up so that it was just a mob rule. Federalist Paper 10, you need to read that because Madison makes direct reference to that. So the founders looked to something else as well. They looked at the Athenian democracy, took some things from that, but they looked at the Roman Republic as well. That was one of the strong ones. The good things about that, they had the Senate, they had the consuls, right? The two consuls, which is sort of like the executive we have now, and they had their constitution, okay? The Republic lasted a very long time. When did it start to come undone? When the Senate became just too corrupt, too powerful, and then you have Julius Caesar, sort of wanting to, okay, we got to make adjustments and corrections on stuff. So what does he do? He fights a civil war. He crosses the Rubicon. He takes over. He sets himself up as more or less ruler or dictator. Now, the Constitution for the Roman Republic had a clause in it. It was sort of this dictator clause that you could take over as dictator of the Republic for 6 months if there were like issues going on. If there was something that needed to be taken care of, like a war, like you had gotten attacked, if the Romans got attacked. And one of the good references for that would be Quintus Cincinnatus, okay? Quintus Cincinnatus was a farmer general, right? And they called upon him. He also was the consul for a little while, and they're like, why don't you stay for, this was a super great guy, noble, just high integrity, a man of character. And they're like, look, everyone loves you. And we know this dog is going insane. Luckily, she's a puppy, or I'd pop her in the face. No, I wouldn't. I would never do that. I can't say that I would never do that, but I would try my best not to. Anyways, so Quintus Cincinnatus is asked, hey, why don't you just remain at least for a little while? Because the people want you to be over, the Republic. They want you to act as consul. And he's like, that goes against the Constitution. I can't do that. Quintus Cincinnatus understood that if he sets that precedent, it will be followed up. And not everybody is going to have the character that he had, right? So he didn't want to set that precedent. Well, then they get attacked for a little while. The Roman Republic gets attacked, and they call upon him to act as dictator for 6 months. Well, I think it's like 3 weeks later, he leads an army to go fight this enemy. In 3 weeks, they defeat him. He comes back, and he gives up the dictatorship. He could have hung on to it, and rightfully so, for 5 more months. This is not about Quintus Cincinnatus, but this is one of those things that they did put into place, that you could be dictator for 6 months out of necessity. Well, it started getting abused big time, right? So those are the precedents that get set. Julius Caesar sort of sets that precedent in a very bad way. So Senate is corrupt. They're running a crap show over there. So that was a real negative. And then you had the Constitution where you had like there were some issues. So they had the Senate, but what about the issue of too much power with the Senate? You got too much power. Well, the founders looked to Great Britain, their recent enemy, right? The people that they had known the best. They looked to Great Britain for the answer. And here's what James Wilson says. And James Wilson is a great. I mean, this guy. When you read the Constitutional Convention notes, he's just full of like really good stuff. So this is what he says. He says, if the legislative authority be not restrained, there can be neither liberty nor stability. And it can only be restrained by dividing it within itself into distinct and independent branches. So, I wanted to put this picture up of the Senate, the Roman Senate. Now, I did have a second, I didn't put it up, but it was a picture of the Senate. So what did they do? They said, we got to split Congress in half. We got to split it in two. So we got to make two separate houses. That was the idea that Great Britain gave them. Why? Because Great Britain had the House of Commons and the House of Lords. They're like, this is a great idea. This will make sure that Congress does not become all powerful. And really, when you read the notes and you read the concerns of the Founding Fathers, that was the primary one. They were really nervous about Congress having way too much power, that they would just run roughshod over the president and over the judiciary. They would just do whatever, and over the people. They would just do whatever they wanted to, right? So, splitting them in two would protect the executive branch and would protect the people. So those are the two things that they really wanted to focus on. Here's what George Mason here's what George Mason had to say. Let's see. He said the people will be represented. They ought therefore to choose the representatives. The House of Representatives was to be the grand depository of the democratic principle of the government. It was, so to speak, to be our House of Commons. Now, take notice. The grand depository of the democratic principle. That is an important term to understand. The House was for the people's direct representation, hence representatives. It was not for the states. House of Representatives are for the people, okay? So here's what they ended up doing was, okay, where is this slide? Where is this freaking slide? I gotta find this slide. You know what? I might not have it. Well, I don't have it. You son of a beasting. Anyways, all right, well, I don't have it. I don't need it. Okay, so here's the thing. More people, more votes. That was the idea. That was one of the concerns with the smaller states. They were like, man, if we don't split up the Congress, if we don't split it up, what's going to end up happening is all the big states are going to have all the power. They're going to have all the power. Why? Because they're going to have the most people. So they're going to have the most number of votes. They'll have the most representatives in the House. So we got to figure something out. And that was one of those compromises between the large states and the small states. And don't get me wrong, the large states didn't like it either. They didn't like it because they were like, what are you talking about? We're the largest state. We have the most people. We should be more or less running the show. Obviously, those aren't direct quotes. But they did not, a lot of the big states did not like what happened in the Senate, which we will get to in a second. Now, more people, more votes. You got a ton of people in the state. You got a lot of votes in the House. You don't hardly have any people in your state. You don't have a lot of votes. Okay, take for instance California, largest state. How many votes do they have? They got 53 votes. Okay, 53 of the allotted 435. Okay, now out of that you have 7 states that have just 1 vote. Okay, like Alaska, Vermont, North Dakota, South Dakota, and a few other small states like Delaware. So you've got 7 states that only have 1 vote. So you've got 7 states that have 7 votes altogether compared to California, which is 1 state, and they've got 53. So you can see where this is going, that if the large states wound up coming together and saying, here's what we want to have happen because this will benefit us as the large states, we can do more or less whatever we want. So really 3 or 4 states could almost run the entire country. We're going to get to that. So they decided, let's split up Congress. Now, one of the things, you get different election cycles. Senators are in for 6 years. Representatives are in for 2 years. So it's 2-year election cycles. Now, obviously the senators are on sort of this every 2 years, a third of the senators have their vote. Their election is up. Okay, so they have to go in for re-election. With the representatives, not the case. So both houses also. So you split them up to protect the executive, to protect the people from Congress having too much power. You give them different election cycles, but at the same time, you meet in the middle by giving the large states more votes because they've got more people, and then the small states, you only get so many votes. Some of you only get 1. You get at least 1. Now, both houses were given exclusive powers. I'm just going to give you a couple of them. Like the representatives, they've got the House of Representatives has the power of the purse. If it's financially involved, it comes from the House of Representatives and then to the Senate. House of Representatives also gets the power to put forth an impeachment, right? The Senate, on the other hand, gets to try the impeachment, okay? The Senate also gets to appoint the nomination of whatever the executive has. So, like, you know, we had this in the last the Trump administration. You had what, 2 or 3 justices. So he nominated a few justices, and the Senate has to approve of those. They've got the power to approve a number of things along with treaties. So House of Representatives, they don't have the power to do that, right? But they had to separate it, like you get certain powers, you get certain powers, so it's not all just lopped into one group. And I talked about that last week. I talked about how Madison and the Founding Fathers, a number of those guys are like, you don't want a majority of people, whether it's in the House of Representatives or in a community, you don't want any group that has one goal in mind, one mission in mind, and it's a passion, and it may be detrimental to a lot of other people, but you can't stop it. You can't stop it. So it's one of those checks that the founders put together. Really good idea. Here are a few extra checks that the founders put together. Another safety measure was the executive, the president's veto power. So the House of Representatives passes something, and they send it over to the Senate or vice versa, and Senate passes it. They send it over to the president. The president can veto it. Say, no, we're not going to do this. Send it back, and if you repass it with like 3/4 of each house, okay, that's tough to do. So that's why a lot of times, even if you have a Republican-held House and Senate, but a Democrat president, you know, they may pass a bill, send it over to the president. The president could veto it, and it go back and still not pass because there's not enough Republicans or Democrats, whoever is running the Congress, right? So that's a really powerful thing that the executive has. Now, another one is the Constitution. The Constitution is a check on all of the branches of the government. Okay? Now, has the Constitution and the Bill of Rights and the laws sort of been ignored in times past? Yes. But more often than not, obviously far more often than not, the Constitution stays true because you have the judicial that comes in and says this is not constitutional. Whether that's the lower courts and it never gets to the Supreme Court, because sometimes the Supreme Court, they get, I don't know how many tens of thousands of cases brought to them, but they only accept a few hundred every cycle. So it's not like if you have a case, you're like, man, I'm just going to take this up right up to the Supreme Court. No, that's not how it works. Okay, it has to be accepted by the Supreme Court. Sometimes just like, no, this is stupid. You have no case. Okay, so that sort of works all the way up. Note, keep this in mind as well. When we say the Constitution, keep in mind that the Bill of Rights, the Bill of Rights were proposed. We had the Constitutional Convention in the summer of 1787, right? Well, the Constitution is passed in September of 1789. The Bill of Rights, they weren't even proposed until 1789, late into 1789. So keep that in mind when you're thinking about the sort of the order of things. Also keep in mind, and because we're talking about the checks, keep in mind that judicial review, sort of what I was talking about, how the Supreme Court looks at it to see if it's constitutional, whatever is done, whether it's a law or whether it's a case. They look at it to see, okay, is this constitutional? If not, we're gonna kick it out, right? Well, judicial review didn't officially really become a practice until 1803 with a case called Marbury versus Madison. And yes, that Madison. And also, finally, the final check on the powers that be that are in the government is you and me. Yes, the people. How? We vote people in. Now, we got to pay attention to what's going on. If we don't like what's happening, then we've got to say, you got to go. We got to put somebody else in. And that's why primaries are a really important thing. So, founders' concern was in order, and this goes to sort of the whole democracy idea, okay? You hear, oh, America's a democracy. America is a democracy. And like I said at the beginning of the show, a little bit. It's a little bit of a democracy. And even in that little bit, it's restrained. So, but here's what the founders were thinking. In order for the people, the citizens, to ratify the Constitution, and this is in here a lot. This is in here a number of times over the course of the months. They are saying in order for the people for us to even have a chance for this Constitution to pass, there must be power at some level placed directly into their hands. Democracy. That was the House of Representatives. That's the only source of direct democracy that we have in this country on a federal level. Okay, we can get to the state level, but state levels pretty much runs the same. Okay, to an extent. The state levels actually we can go on a rampage there, but it is different. Okay, that's more of a direct democracy. But let me move on, if you will, because I'll probably have somebody like, hey, wait a minute, time's out. What do you mean by? And I'm going to end up doing that to myself. So even with this one source of direct democracy, it was limited in scope. Only citizens were allowed to vote. Okay, so you had to be a certain age. Well, you know how it is now. It has changed over the past 240 something years in this country. But you know what you have to do, or in order to vote, you have to be a citizen, and you got to abide by certain rules. You can't have, like a felony, different things like that. I don't need to get into that, but it's limited in scope. Also, proximity. You can't just vote for, if you're in Texas, like with me, I got one guy Well, he's retiring this year. But I get one representative in my district. Okay? That's it. I don't get to vote for somebody in another district. I don't get to have a say in that. I don't get to have a say in what goes on in another state or in another district in another state. I have no say in that. It concerns me, right? But I don't get to have a say in that. So, proximity. There was a reason for that. And also, they made it, your districts are going to be, for every 30,000 people, you had a representative. Obviously, that has changed over time with the Permanent Apportionment Act of 1929. That capped how many representatives we have in the House at 435. So, because you think about how many representatives you would have now if you did 30,000 per 30,000 people, one representative, and then you have how many citizens in this country who are eligible to vote. Yeah, think about that. But actually, it's not even citizens, it's persons, right? It's persons. So children all the way up, okay? 30,000 persons. And here's something I wanted to bring up that they understood with this idea of proximity. This is Alexander Hamilton talking. He says this. This is, I want to say this is in the constitutional, no, this is Federalist Paper 17. He says this: it is a known fact in human nature that its affections are commonly weak in proportion to the distance or diffusiveness of the object, and that man is more attached to his family than to his neighborhood than to the community at large. So, proximity played a huge role in putting everything together. They understood, well, you need to have it to where it's only like 30, okay, we'll scale it down to 30,000 people, but it's only for districts. So we need to condense. We can't have an entire state voting for representatives. They don't know who that person is, right? So it's the person in your community. That was the idea. So proximity. You know the person best, so you can vote. Chances are you'll be able to put somebody in who is a good representative of your district, of your area, somebody with integrity, somebody you know well, or at least the degrees of separation are fewer, right? It's not the Kevin Bacon. Sometimes it'll be just 2 or 3. So now, in the Senate, proximity played a huge role as well, okay? That was a huge thing because you only had 2. You only get 2 in a state. In, like I said, California, you get 53. In Texas, you get 36. Okay, so those are the 2 largest. Well, in each state, and there are 7 states that have more senators than they do representatives. So, balance of power. That's how important that was for the founders. They knew that they had to have a balance of power. Proximity, we don't have it anymore, but senators would be chosen by the state legislature. So if you're in Texas, the Capitol, our state legislature, they would pick the 2 people that they thought would best represent the state and send them on over to DC. That was the idea. Why? Because they would know the people the best. They would have worked with those people. And we did that for a while until 1913 with the 17th Amendment. They changed that stupidly. Okay, they used this whole idea of corruption. I really think that we should go back to how it was and have the state legislatures. They should be the ones choosing the 2 that represent the state. Okay, so, but the majority of the state legislators had to pick those 2. It had to be majority, right? But that's a very restrained version of majority rule. It's not 29 million people in Texas voting, or the 40 million people in California, or whatever. Obviously, they don't all vote. But you know what I mean. This is just a constrained version of majority. So whoever won the majority of votes in the state house, well, you're going to D.C. And good luck out there. Okay? So, the senators, keep this in mind as well. It is division on purpose. Like I said, they looked at the Athenian democracy, they looked at the Roman Republic, and then they looked at the Roman Republic. They said, well, we got to, you see what happened to the Senate? We got to split the son of a gun in half. We got to follow Great Britain's lead. So we're going to split it in half. Senators are not representatives of you and me. They're representatives of the state. It is what is best for the state. What's best for the state economically? It's what is best for the state regarding infrastructure. They are to work to combat laws or promote laws that are detrimental to the state, to their specific state. Okay, they fight for the state. That's the idea. They don't fight for the individuals. Okay, the founders understood that there was a difference. There was a significant difference between the states and the people themselves. Okay, understand that. So combat the laws that are bad for this state. We got to fight against those. Promote and advocate the laws that are good for the state. If it's going to benefit us economically, if it's going to benefit us in infrastructure, if it's going to benefit us with environmental issues, okay, let's push those things. Let's get those done. Okay, so you have to keep that in mind. You had the major change in 1913. You had the 16th and the 17th Amendment change. 16th Amendment, federal tax, right? But that's a totally different thing. 17th Amendment changed the way that we put in senators, and you put them in through direct democracy, and I think it is a bad idea. It is a bad idea, and I will tell you why it's a bad idea. Senators were not supposed to be accountable to the large populous cities. They were supposed to be accountable to the districts of the state. The districts. Right? So their state legislator, like, hey man, you're screwing my district over. Or you got like 10 or 20 of them that are, screwing your district over. Or he's screwing or she's screwing your district over, and like all of the state legislators are like, man, I can't stand this person who's representing our state. But guess what? You've got one, maybe two cities that are majorly populous, or maybe even just one, and they're sending that person over to D.C. Think about this. Think about New York. A majority of the people that live in New York live in New York City. Okay, so who's running that state? One city, and that happens. That happens throughout the country. Okay, think of Oregon. There's a reason why, like I think 20 counties are they're trying to pass this bill to become part of Idaho. Why? Because they want to get out of that. They want to get away from Portland, because Portland is bringing everybody down. So that's why it's important, or it was important when we had it, that you had the state legislators, the people who really knew what these people, the senators, were doing, and would hold them accountable, hold their feet to the fire and say, hey, you're not doing a good job, you're screwing us over, you're out of here. Okay? You're not, we're not electing you to go and represent our state because you suck. Okay? Or, man, you're doing a really great job, we got to get you back in there. Go on. Well, all that changed in 1913. So, it's not about, the Senate was not about the masses, okay? It was about the state. It's about job opportunity. It's about environmental issues. It's about infrastructure. It's about education. It's about a ton of things, okay? And you've got millions. Now, take, for instance, like the 7 states that have one, or even the states that have 2 representatives. Those are small, okay? So to an extent, like, that's like, okay, everybody's voting for the representatives and the senators. All right, it's almost oranges to oranges when it comes to numbers, okay? But at the same time, you're representing 2 different things. You're representing 2 different things, people and states. What the 17th Amendment did was they placed the senatorial power in the hands of a few populous cities, pretty much drowning out the least populous cities or the least populous districts. All right, so the thing is, the founders thought we've got to protect the minority. We've got to protect the minority voice. So election methods, one people, you got two different ways of electing, one by the people and one by the legislator. It was a check on the majority to protect the minority, and this is why each state receives 2 votes, regardless of how big it is. Okay, because there has to be that balance of power. This is something that is reiterated a lot by the founders, and that is that the majority, the minority must not be sacrificed to the majority. I want to read from, let's see, where is that? Oh, that didn't show up. Anyways, I want to read from Madison's Federalist Paper number 10, which I referenced at the beginning. And if you've never read it, I really hope that you do go read that, because it would be good for you. But obviously read all of them. But number 10, golly, you can just take so many quotes and utilize them for explaining a lot of things. So this is what he says. In reference to a pure democracy, he says, a pure democracy, by which I mean a society consisting of a small number of citizens who assemble and administer the government in person. So whether that's townspeople or whether that's representatives, okay? It's all just one big group. He's saying that they can admit of no cure for the mischiefs of faction. Like I said at the beginning, they were really working to try to keep a majority or a large group of people from assembling and going after one specific interest or passion. I really hit that home last week. You can check that out. He says, a common passion or interest will, in almost every case, be felt by a majority of the whole. A communication and concert result from the form of government itself, and there is nothing to check the inducements to sacrifice the weaker party or an obnoxious individual. You know, there are some times where I think even you and I, we will maybe see clips, or we'll read the newspaper or get online, or we'll just, you know, if we're really into it, watch C-SPAN, and be like, why is this idiot a representative? Or why is this idiot a senator? Well, look, the founders understood that that would take place. They're like, chances are you're going to get better people in the Senate because of the state legislators. They're going to be the ones knowing, they're going to pick the best and the brightest, right? That was the idea. So we're really not going to run into that issue. But when you have 30,000 people, this was the idea at the time, when you have, which is way more now, when you have 30,000 people voting for one person in particular, chances are they're not going to know that person nearly as well as however many is in a particular state legislator in a certain state, right? So that was going to be like sort of an issue. So those are things to think about. Like, we may want a weaker party or an obnoxious individual kicked out, like, get out of here. And interestingly enough, that is in the Constitution that can be done. Like, if you're just, like, if no one likes you, you can, now it takes a vast majority, I think it's 2/3 or 3/4 of like the particular house, the Senate or the House of Representatives, to kick you out and say, you're a nut job and you need to go. So keep that in mind. That is a good thing to have there. But at the same time, it's not majority, right? It's not, 435 is like 278? And you only have a slight majority, by 1. And they're like, oh yeah, because you do that, you can get rid of everybody in the opposing party. Like I said, the weaker party. And it doesn't mean, like right now, take for instance, when he's saying the weaker party, he's not talking about a party that is, let's say, the Libertarian Party. That's a very small party. There's a few people when it comes to who's in power in Congress and different things like that. Now, right now, in Congress, in the House of Representatives, Who is the weaker party? The Republicans. So that's why he is saying we can't just do this pure democracy, majority rule, and that's it. It's strictly majority rule. And if you got majority, if you've got 51 out of 100, well, you get to run roughshod over everybody, right? Because what would end up happening is you would just get rid of everybody, the obnoxious people, the people who stood in your way. And that's exactly what happened in the Athenian democracy. They're like, all right, we're moving. We won. We're taking over. So keep that in mind. Now, it took 124 years for us to sacrifice the state minorities to the majorities. That's a shame. It is a shame, and I really hope one day we go back and we unratify the 17th Amendment. I think that would be a big benefit for our country. 108 years later, unfortunately, today, as of today, there's a growing trend, a growing demand to sacrifice the minority of the entire country to the majority by abolishing the Electoral College. Ladies and gentlemen, the founders kept in mind the minority. They kept in mind that we've got to protect the people, all right? We've got to protect the minority voice here, which is why they created the Electoral College, and that's going to be a talk for another night. But that is the trend that's being pushed right now, and don't fall for it. Do not fall for it, okay? Because it's a pure democracy, and there's only destruction that leads to that, okay? And I talked about that heavily last week. You can go revisit. I know my Wi-Fi screwed up, and it got weird. Okay, but whatever. So just as a few cities, this is what would end up happening in some of these states. And I referenced Oregon, I referenced New York, how it's Portland and New York City that run the show there. Just as a few cities now consolidate power over states through the legislation of the 17th Amendment, a few states would consolidate power over the entire country if there was a new 28th Amendment or whichever number would come later. I mean, they don't pass a lot of amendments, but the 28th Amendment, if that were to be the case, you can kiss it all goodbye. You become a pure democracy, and as Madison said, they become violent in their deaths, right? So, Federalist Paper number 10. Ladies and gentlemen, that is it for the show. I can't wait to be back with you next week. And also, if you don't mind, while you're watching, if you haven't yet, please subscribe to our YouTube channel. Check us out. And also, if you haven't yet, even if you don't listen to podcasts, do me a huge solid. Go subscribe, leave us a 5-star review. That would be so wonderful because we do a great job. And leave a review. You'd be doing me a big favor. Also, keep in mind, you can go to our website, thesonsofhistory.com. We've got a blog. We've got a number of articles up there. You can read those. A lot of good information. And also, we've got merch. Merch is available. You can go purchase it. Click on the merch in the menu, and it takes you to our online store. You can purchase stuff, coffee mugs, t-shirts, different things like that. It's really cool stuff, and I hope you enjoy it. So, all right. I don't know if anybody has any questions. We do have time for a little bit of a live chat. I've got, 1 minute and 50 seconds? Not really, because it's not about, the time or whatever. But I really enjoyed this talk. I'm super passionate about us. We are a republic. And also, keep in mind, I don't know if you've seen it yet, but I was on the Epoch Times, the Epoch TV with Joshua Phillip on Crossroads. It's only available on Epoch TV. You can check out that conversation. It was a lot of fun, and I'll be honest with you, I did better than I thought I did. So, all right, ladies and gentlemen, that is it from me. I will talk to you later.